Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic for today's webinar is State Leadership in Low and Moderate Income Solar Energy, featuring Massachusetts, Michigan, and Oregon. This webinar is the first in our series for the 2020 State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. This webinar is being presented by the Clean Energy States Alliance, also known as CESA, and we have with us today guest speakers from all of these three states and our host for the webinar, CESA Executive Director Warren Leon. But before I pass it over to them, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees for this webinar are in listen-only mode. That means that you can hear us, hopefully, but we can't hear you. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of the webinar. You can call in using your computer, mic, and speakers, or you can connect via telephone. If you'd like to expand the webinar console so that you can view it larger, you can click the orange arrow that you see circled, or you can minimize it so you can see the presentation better, also by clicking that orange arrow. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions and your comments throughout the webinar by typing them into the questions box on the webinar console and hitting send. We will be addressing questions throughout the webinar, and also we'll be saving plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So please make sure you type your questions in when you think of them. Don't wait until the very end. We'll get to as many questions as we can. And a final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will send you an email with a copy of the webinar recording and also with the PDF of the slides within 24 to 48 hours. And we'll also be posting all of these materials on CESA's website at cesa.org/webinars. So with that, I would like to pass it over to our host for today's webinar, Warren Leon. As I said, Warren is the Executive Director of the Clean Energy States Alliance. Warren?
Hey, thank you very much, Samantha. The Clean Energy States Alliance is a membership organization of public agencies and public entities across the country. You can see our members here on the screen. We have representatives in 20 states across the country, and our members include many of the most active and aggressive agencies in promoting clean energy in the country. If we go to the next slide, one of our activities at CESA is to organize and administer the State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. We started this program back in 2009, and this is the 7th time we will be offering State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. And the way it works is that any of our member organizations are welcome and encouraged to nominate a program or a project from their state for consideration. It has to be a program or a project with demonstrable results and that is worth emulating by other agencies and other places and is advancing clean energy. And we give these awards out not by the CESA staff picking our favorites, but instead we put together a panel of objective, distinguished judges who read through all the nominations and make their selections. And this year, we gave out 6 awards, which you can see up here on the screen. And it was interesting that 3 of the awards focused on the topic of low and moderate income solar. That reflects that that's an area where there's been a lot of experimentation, a lot of interesting ideas emerging in recent years, and it's also an indication that it's a real priority area for state agencies across the country. And so 3 of the programs were linked to low and moderate income solar, and those are the ones we're going to hear about today. Those programs are the Massachusetts Solar Loan Program for the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center and Massachusetts Department of Energy. That program offers special incentives and fosters partnerships with local banks and credit unions to increase access to financing for solar PV ownership. The second program, and I'm describing these in the order in which we will hear about them. The second is Energy Trust of Oregon's Inclusive Innovation Project, which makes solar affordable and accessible for customers with lower incomes, for rural customers, and for communities of color. And finally, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy's Michigan Solar Communities Low to Moderate Income Access Program, which uses a community solar model to enable customers to access solar, obtain weatherization services, and save on their electric bills. Now, the way we're going to organize this is I will introduce one of the presenters. That person will give a presentation. We'll then take just one or two questions, then go on to the next presentation. And then after all three presentations, we'll have time for additional questions. So the first person we're going to hear from is Kelsey Reed, who's a senior program manager at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. He's been with MassCC since 2014, and he's leading the organization's efforts in the partnership with the Department of Energy Resources on the $45 million Mass Solar Loan Program. He also drives MassCC's efforts in supporting general industry growth and the availability of financing for the on-site commercial solar market. Kelsey has a degree in economics and physics from Bowdoin College, and he has previously worked in economic and environmental research and data analytics. So I'm going to turn things over to Kelsey, and I'll introduce the other speakers later. Thanks.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all able to hear me all right. And thanks for the intro, Lauren. So I'm going to talk through the Mass Solar Loan Program a little bit for you today. And get my slides moving forward. Maybe.
Sorry, Kelsey, try now.
There we go. All right, thanks. So first, as a little bit of an intro for MassCC, for those who aren't familiar with it, we are a quasi-state agency here in Massachusetts focused on growing the state's clean energy industry through a variety of initiatives ranging from direct investments in startups, innovation support, workforce connection and stakeholder engagement, direct rebates and incentives to support commercial deployment or deployment of technologies, a whole range of things. And so what I'm going to talk about today is the Mass Solar Loan Program, and particularly kind of what we're doing from a low and moderate income perspective on solar. So as everyone, I'm sure most everyone on this webinar is aware, solar has seen a real remarkable growth over the past 10 years or kind of more here now. And so looking through 2006, 2011, and then 2016, just the amount of solar in the state has really boomed. And so through all that, MassCC and a number of other agencies have looked at how we can ensure that solar deployment is able to access low and moderate income or other underserved markets. And we've looked at a variety and run a variety of programs in support of that mission over the years. A few kind of key ones to highlight now are the Mass Solar Loan Program, which is the focus here, but we've also done a program called ACRE, which was a combined heat pump and solar program for low and moderate income residents. The primary incentive system in the state, SMART, has a low and moderate income adder as part of that program. And there have been other initiatives that we've done focused on helping serve those underserved markets. I think the kind of key thing from our point of view there is that there isn't a single silver bullet to reaching these communities, and there's a lot of different ways to try and attack that challenge. The Mass Solar Loan Program. So going back to kind of how we got here, this was sparked by a 2013 study from the Department of Energy Resources, who has been our kind of partner organization on this program, demonstrating that the benefits of directly owning solar PV were greater over the third-party owned models that were appearing, leases and power purchase agreements. This was a kind of as expected study in that in directing and owning the solar, there isn't a middleman taking some portion of the savings or revenue from that system. And so obviously the benefits for the owner can be greater. The other piece there is that a lot of third-party owned companies were out of state, and so owning solar PV could keep more of those benefits within the Commonwealth as well. And so there was a intention based on that to design a program that could help customers overcome the kind of initial cost challenges of solar that leases and PPAs can help with, while hopefully encouraging direct ownership and keeping more of those benefits local. And through a lot of stakeholder work with the solar industry, with the lending industry, other states and the programs that they've been run over a couple of years, we came to this Mass Solar Loan design. And a real focus through that on kind of expanding financing options, which was a kind of big goal from the start of the program in helping ensure more people across incomes and credit scores and everything had access to solar financing for their residential systems. And the kind of particular model that we wanted to work with through that was partnering with banks and credit unions across the state to offer this financing and leverage that expertise and capital that banks and credit unions could bring. They're out there every day making consumer loans and underwriting consumer loans, and bringing that expertise in to kind of merge it with solar. So we, over the course of the program, have partnered with 17 lenders and had discussions about solar lending with many more as well as a network of over 100 installers that have participated in the program, offering these loans at various times, and really helping expand our reach to some of these underserved markets that may have had difficulty accessing solar or finding a way to install solar before. So the program ended up being launched in December 2015. And again, that focus was on connecting customers who want to purchase a solar PV system for their residential property with lenders who are offering a solar loan product. And that kind of key point there is that lenders were doing their own underwritings and they're kind of business as usual, but for a solar loan within kind of certain set loan requirements that we'd established to help ensure there was some standardization to the type of product, but also some consumer protection pieces and caps on closing cost, a cap on the maximum interest rate, certain set terms that have to be offered. So there has to be a 10-year term offered by these lenders to help ensure that these products work well for solar PV. And on top of that, what MassCC does is add 3 types of loan support. And these are incentives focused on kind of reducing the overall cost of financing for the participating borrowers, some incentives targeted particularly at low and moderate income customers to expand access to that group, as well as incentives based on credit score that can expand access to those with lower credit scores. And before I go into what those incentives or loan support incentives are in a little more detail, I want to talk about kind of the structure of the program. One of the kind of key components of the program is that over time we would be stepping our incentives down, always with the kind of long-term intention that we pull ourselves out of this market and leave a kind of competitive market of lenders offering solar loan products, ideally with the kind of experience and background of having lent to kind of a broader pool of applicants, including lower incomes and different credit scores, such that they can continue offering a kind of a financing option to a wider range of participants. And so what that has reflected in kind of our program design is that when we started, it was a $30 million program with incentives available, certain incentives available to all of the participants, so regardless of their income. And then over the course of the program, we tiered the amount of those incentives down and then also focused more specifically. So we added $10 million back in December 2017 and at that time focused all of our incentives on what we qualify as low or moderate income. And then in September 2019, added an additional 5 million, and again tiered those incentives down so that we were only focused on what we call the low income category. And what you can see those categories in that chart on the right, but our definitions were below 80% of state median for low income and between 80 and 120% for that moderate income group. And so what that's resulted in is what you can see in the chart on the left there, but 78% of the funding under our program to date has gone to those income qualified categories. And currently, in the remaining offering of our program, 100% of our funding is going to the category 1 because that's where we're limited to at the moment. So what those 3 incentives are, and this is one of the kind of key design features of the program, is that there would be some modularity to these different incentives so that we could both adjust them independently as dictated by kind of how the market was taking this program and the reaction to it. But I think also, speaking to this audience, our kind of point is that a program like this doesn't have to be run with all 3. The individual elements can be chosen based on the kind of type of program a municipality or city or state is looking to run, and the kind of targeted challenge they want to attack. So we have these 3 incentives: an interest rate buy down, which currently is a 1.5% buy down available for that low income below 80% group. Prior to the 2017 change, that 1.5% buy down was available for all customers. So every customer would see a 1.5% reduced interest rate on the program. That reduction was actually 3% at the start of the program and is one of the things that we tiered down over time. Income-based loan support, which functions a little bit more like a grant. And at the start of the program, again, this was the kind of one income-based component. Now all 3 incentives are income dependent, but at the start, this was the primary income-based one. And it functions as a principal buy down. So for that category 1 low income group, they're eligible for a 30% reduction of their loan principal at completion of the project. So if it was a $20,000 solar PV system, we're going to pay $6,000 to their lender, and it's going to directly reduce the principal on that loan. So once that payment goes through, that customer only has $14,000 in remaining principal on their loan. And then lastly, we have a loan loss reserve, which is a kind of incentive structure designed to increase the range of credit scores that lenders would be able to lend to by adding a kind of element of security for them for loans they make to lower credit scores. So the structure is a little bit complicated there, but it's we pre-fund an account for each lender, and then as those lenders make loans to lower credit score borrowers, we tuck away a little amount based on the percentage of the loan size for each loan they make to credit scores down in those lower ranges. And then in the event one of those lower credit scores does end up defaulting, a lender can recover a set amount of the loan principal at that time from their loan loss reserve account. So it's a way to secure those loans that are being made to lower credit score borrowers, to encourage lenders to go a little bit beyond the ranges they may normally be comfortable with, and encourage a lending to a broader spectrum. And the kind of, one of the main theses with that is that solar PV being a pretty different type of asset to lend for compared to, say, a car, which doesn't increase in value or doesn't generate a revenue stream. These systems can generate revenue for these homeowners that can be used to pay off that loan. A little bit more about those loan requirements we set to keep things a little bit standardized. These are all fixed rate loans. We require a 10-year term to align with the state incentive programs. There's a cap interest rate, which is tied to the prime rate at the federal level. So that currently is 6%, but that changes over time as the federal rate changes. We allow our loans to be secured or unsecured, and that means either completely unsecured, secured on the actual property, so on the house in certain cases, or what most of our lenders have ended up doing is securing on the equipment themselves through what's called a UCC1 filing, which I'm happy to go into more detail for anyone who wants the nitty-gritty lender details on this. And then when we're describing it to lenders, we talk about it as kind of a construction loan model. So 2 disbursements, one made when the loan closes, and then the other made when the project is complete. And during that kind of installation period, the customer is paying just interest only for up to 12 months on that first 35% disbursement. So what that does and was intended to do is ensure that the installers have some funding upfront in order to purchase equipment and go through the early steps, but also during that time keeping the payments required from the borrower low because that system is not yet generating them revenue, and then letting the system turn into full principal and interest payments once the project is complete and installed, and therefore hopefully aligning customer loan payments with the savings from the system. And then the last piece that's worth mentioning is we require a free reamortization to allow customers to lower their payments, either that principal reduction that we're supplying for income eligible participants and or the tax credit if they're able to take advantage of that. So that customers could apply that 30% tax credit to their loan and then lower their payments accordingly when that comes through. So what this has ended up resulting in, we've seen 6,200 projects apply to the program to date, and that's resulted in over 5,400 loans closing. And I would note that these numbers are a couple of months old now from back when we were putting in for the Slice Award, but some of these have increased a bit over the past few months. And of that 5,400, 2,800 have been to income qualified residents, which we think is one of the kind of key wins of this program, is that we've been able to help 2,800 low and moderate income Massachusetts residents purchase solar PV. That 5,400 loans is $176 million in loan value, and then as mentioned, that's been based on $39 million in program awards, 78% of which have gone to low and moderate income participants. And then the other piece I wanted to highlight here by showing our lenders and their participation is just the kind of range of ways lenders have been able to participate in the program. Some lenders, and UMass 5 is a great example, were able to really embrace this program, set very competitive interest rates. They have a statewide profile, so they're able to lend all across the Commonwealth, and as a result, have made $55 million in loans through this program, which is a nice, considerable chunk of business for them on the scale of that lender. Well, on the kind of flip side, we've also seen lenders like Greenfield or Southern Mass who have a much smaller lending target area, and maybe haven't focused so much on it, but can still make it a nice smaller offering that they're able to offer to their local members and things like that. So there's kind of a range of ways lenders are able to participate in this program. And I would also note we actually had a few lenders, Coastal Heritage being one, who ended up having to kind of pause accepting new loan applications because these are kind of smaller community banks and credit unions, and they hit a cap for kind of how much of any one loan product type they wanted to have on their books. So I think for a lot of our lenders, they found this to be a really encouraging product offering in terms of what they were offering and the loan products they have. The other piece we like to really highlight with the program of that 5,400 projects and what that translate to in 46 megawatts of residential solar, and our ability to kind of really cover across the state with it. So we've had systems installed on the program in 97% of Massachusetts' 351 towns, which we're proud of and we think is an important aspect of how we run this type of program. The projects we're seeing, just for a little bit of flavor, were 32,008 point something kilowatts, in current averaging, or have averaged around 380 a watt. And that's over the kind of multiple years of the program as well. So if you look more recently, that price is lower. And then lastly, what the unsubsidized interest rate has been on the program, we've seen a median of 5.5%, again, across all 4 years. And so for customers who are eligible for that interest rate buy down, they're actually seeing a 4% interest rate on these loans. And then one of the kind of last pieces I want to talk to is that we also think through this program, we have a great opportunity to look at how solar loans perform. It's a market of loans that didn't have a lot of data on it previously. And by the nature of our program, we have the ability to look at that. And our intent is to make sure we can share that information so that Other lenders who are considering this type of product have more resources and more information going into it. It's been proven out, through the lenders that have participated in our program, and therefore, we can kind of increase competition for solar loans, but also let lenders, set more aggressive rates because they have a better sense of how these portfolios are going to perform. So the key points, we've seen a pretty strong performance under our program to date. So our default rate was 0.3% on over 5,000 loans that are in that full principal and interest payments. And that's with a roughly average a little bit over 2 years of kind of seasoning or time on those loans. So obviously still early in the overall course of what's an average of 10-year loan terms, but still a very promising performance and default rate to start. And then we also are able to kind of slice and look at that default rate as it correlates to income or FICO score, which I think is an important thing to be able to share. So what you can see in the kind of chart below is how by our income categories that default rate has been performing. And you can kind of key things there are that we have a 0.4% default rate for that below 80% income category, so a bit higher than the non-income qualified 0.2%, with a few caveats of obviously our sample size at 15 total defaults is pretty low. And so there's, easy to skew that number there. But then the other key point is, for example, delinquency data, the number of times a loan has been 30 days late, that below 80% actually performs stronger than the non-income qualified market. So we're excited to be able to kind of share and look at this data and show how even for lower income participants, these loans can perform very well, and share that with the market moving forward over the term of these loans. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and move on to any questions you have now or later at the end as well.
Hey, thanks very much, Kelsey. Yes, a bunch of questions came in. I'm only going to ask one or two now, and we'll try to come back to others after the other presentation. The first question is, where did the funding for the program come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a little bit of a mix. So this program was done in combination with the Department of Energy Resources and MassCC. So that original $30 million came through the Department of Energy Resources as from alternative compliance payment funding, which is part of the Commonwealth's renewable portfolio standard and the alternative compliance payments that EDCs need to make to meet that standard. So it was part of that pool of funding. And then the additional funding that we've added has been a little bit of a mix. So the 10 million was split 50-50 between more alternative compliance funding from DOER as well as funding from MassCC's funding source, which is the Renewable Energy Trust, paid by surcharges on ratepayers' electricity bills here in the Commonwealth. And then the most recent 5 million focused solely on low and moderate income was solely from our Renewable Energy Trust funding.
Good. And let me ask just one more question now, and that's, how did MassCEC first initiate discussions with the lending institutions to get them interested in the program? Did you have to do special outreach to them?
Yeah, there was quite a lot of outreach. So the first outreach, began back when actually DOER was still in the kind of concepting phases for the program. There was stakeholder work done with lending institutions, and particularly working with kind of some of the lender group organizations, so the Mass Bankers Association or the Mass Credit Union League, things like that, to bring their membership into the discussion during the kind of design phases. And then as we finalized the program design and we're setting things like the standard loan requirements, we wanted to do a lot more stakeholder work with them. So we had a whole RFI process trying to reach out to those groups and those markets. And then as we went forward to launch and finding lender partners to offer these products, we essentially did a little bit of a roadshow kind of thing. So myself and colleagues were working with groups like the Mass Bankers Association and others, and we had a consultant on board with a focus on the lending industry here in Mass, and they were helping set up meetings with us and banks and credit unions across the state who had an interest in this type of thing. And we were going out there and kind of giving this pitch on the program and why we think solar lending is an opportunity for them to get into, and the structure of the program and how we thought they could participate. So that was a lot of those, more than the 17 lenders that we talked with, but going around as a roadshow, presenting at various conferences for them about this. So there's definitely a fair bit of outreach about it, and it's also one of the elements of the program that we think will continue long term, particularly now that we also have 5 years of experience and data and to share about this type of loan and how lenders can participate in this market. The long-term mission, as mentioned, is that we leave and have and grow a kind of competitive industry of solar loan products that are available. And so we want to bring more and more lenders into this market, and it kind of remains a focus of what we're going to do going forward.
Hey, thanks very much, Kelsey. We're going to move on to our second presentation, but first I want to say to folks on the line, if you're interested in learning more about the Mass Solar Loan Program, we this week just came out with a new report with case studies of all 6 winners of the State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. I encourage you to read the case study of the Mass Solar Loan Program in that report, and we will share a link to that report with you at the end of this webinar. Our second presentation is going to be from Energy Trust of Oregon, and our presenter is Lizzie Rubidoux, who's the Program Strategies Manager for Renewables at Energy Trust of Oregon. She has 15 years of experience in solar and renewables program management. She's known nationally for inventing the highly successful Solarize model in collaboration with local neighborhoods in Portland, Oregon. She recently led the development team at Energy Trust to launch Oregon's new community solar program. So let me turn it over to Lizzie.
Great, thank you so much, Warren. And I'm just going to get set up here to share my screen. Okay, great. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Energy Trust of Oregon, we are an independent nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping the utility customers in Oregon and Southwest Washington invest in and benefit from energy efficiency as well as clean renewable power. We started serving customers back in 2002 and provide everything from cash incentives and services to help utility customers make improvements to save energy, as well as incentives and community support for generating renewable power. We work with all types of businesses, from homeowners, commercial customers, agricultural customers, as well as with communities. So a little bit about myself. I'm Lizzie Rubidoux. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Program Strategies Manager for Renewable Energy at Energy Trust. And what that really translates into in real life is that I head up innovation, and I support our teams in our renewables sector that are working on rooftop and community solar, on biopower, and small-scale hydro with their strategy and program design work. In addition to what I do, I wanted to just take a moment to mention why I do this work. So these photos help tell the story of why I do what I do. Part of that is for the future. That's my kiddo there on the left-hand side. Part of this is because I'm passionate about the place that I love so much, which is Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And thirdly, I do this for my community, which I truly believe won't be able to achieve its potential until we are all coming together to address underlying inequalities. So switching gears to talk about the Inclusive Innovation Project, we were absolutely thrilled to be awarded a SLICE Award for this body of work. And one of the innovations that underpinned this work was the overall approach we ended up using to adapt design thinking and kind of product development models that are more traditionally used kind of in for-profit private business, and particularly the tech industry. We adapted those types of models to serve our objective, which was creating more equitable solar programs. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today in the presentation is kind of how we got where we got, in addition to a little bit of what it is that we're doing today as a result of this work. And before I dive into that, I do want to note that this work was funded in part by a multi-year grant from the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Energy Technologies Office. And that grant work was managed wonderfully by CSA, by the Clean Energy States Alliance. And in Oregon, it was enabled through a partnership that Energy Trust had with Oregon Department of Energy. So some of you may be familiar with some of the product development approaches that are shown here in the sine waves and the circles. Design thinking, a lean startup, agile, right? There's like entire sections at libraries, or you can spend lots of money buying all these books about all these models. And personally, over the years, I've been trained in all of these. I've used all three of these different models in different projects I've worked on. But to be honest, my colleagues and I have often found it challenging to apply these models directly to the work that we do as a not-for-profit public benefits organization. And we've also found it hard to apply it given the context in which we operate. I know a lot of folks here work for agencies at Energy Trust. While we're a nonprofit organization, we are under the oversight of the Oregon Public Utility Commission. So it's just different, right? It's just different than the way that kind of private business operates. But there's a lot to be gained. There's a lot of deep, rich value in these approaches. And so we wanted to innovate on the innovation models, taking what we thought were the best, most applicable pieces of each of these, merging and adapting them to fit our needs and our goals. But of course, real life doesn't actually look like a nice tidy diagram with a clean sine wave and a couple of loops. And our experience really has felt more like a journey. And I'm going to share with you today how that journey unfolded. So about 4 years ago, we really took a hard look at our outcomes. We realized that it was past time for us to be focusing in our renewable energy programs on doing a better job for large groups of customers who are not being what I would consider meaningfully served with our solar program. And specifically, this was people with low or moderate incomes. This was our communities of color, and these were our more rural customers. And once we kind of internalized that and embraced it, we also acknowledged that we needed to get focused and really intentional about how we were going to reach lower income customers and communities of color. But the reality is that we weren't the experts in this space. And at the time, we didn't really have a lot of deep relationships. We had, done collaborations and support and sponsorships, but we didn't have deep, meaningful relationships with the community organizations that we thought did have that expertise. And we weren't interested in trying to, sit in, I guess, our ivory towers and design in a box without really understanding and engaging the people we were trying to benefit. So that really kicked off a learning process for us. And I'm going to take a little bit of time, a diversion here, to talk about how we did that learning, because it was a very important piece of this inclusive innovation work. So here's how we did our learning. We really engaged on a lot of levels, and it kind of was an evolving process. We did not, come up with a brilliant plan on how to go about doing this up front and then execute on it. We kind of learned as we went along, and that was that kind of, learn, do, improve loop that we were on, and how that got applied to our learning process here. So first we started with community gatherings and listening sessions. This was at the very beginning of the work, and these were come one, come all type community meetings. We brought in some speakers, pulled people together for a roadshow from our Oregon Department of Energy, our Public Utility Commission, a couple of clean energy nonprofits, including ourselves, to sort of set the stage, provide the context. This was at the very early days also of Oregon starting to think about the design of its community solar program. And we just talked to people. We had about 40 people attend each meeting. We would break into small groups to understand community members' priorities for solar and how it could be used to benefit people with low and moderate incomes. We would break bread. Every one of these meetings, we would share a meal from a local caterer. And I would say that this piece of sharing food and really became a feature going forward, because it really does deepen connections. And we got really great results from these meetings. We learned what communities valued firsthand, We heard what was important to people, what people were afraid about. And we also, very importantly, got a list of who was interested in this topic, who wanted to be more involved long-term, and offers of support. So after this kind of first phase of listening sessions, we used that list that we created as a starting place and ended up forming a working group that was made up of community organizations and energy groups of all different kind of sizes and flavors from across the state. We had really great geographic diversity. This group ended up meeting regularly, about once a month for 8 months. So it went on for a long time. And these working group meetings involved presentations and discussions. We talked about and learned together about kind of the pressing priorities from the community perspective, housing, workforce development. We did shared learning around solar, around battery storage and resilience. One of the things we also did was we provided scholarships to some of these organizations to allow them to take the time to participate, and also to recognize and value the contributions they were making to the conversation, it ended up being a key learning piece for us. And as I mentioned, we always provided lunch because that was an opportunity to network and build those relationships. One of the important accomplishments of this group is that they worked with us then to draft a set of core strategies that could be used to deploy solar in a way that would benefit those underserved Oregon customer groups that I mentioned earlier. So we then took this as a next phase, this draft set of strategies, and we went back out on the road. And this time we met with people and organizations individually in a large series of one-on-one meetings. And the goal of these conversations was to get input on those strategies and kind of figure out how could we go to the next step, get into implementation. So we ended up meeting, we had about 30 different meetings with organizations across different sectors across the state. And we treated each of these conversations as kind of a hypothesis test. We'd say, we think funding's an issue. What if we put more money on the table? What if we provided technical assistance? We just kept testing assumptions that we'd come to as along the way in developing those strategies. And we would disprove some of them along the way, the result of which was revising the strategies. And one of the key strategies on the final list we ended up with was to build capacity, to build the ability within communities and community organizations for doing solar. So in order to do that, we went back and kind of revamped the working group model, did a version 2.0. And this time, the goals were to get a more diverse set of participants to really pull in some groups who, really never had come to the table before with solar, but had an interest, and we saw an opportunity. So we worked actually with a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to help us develop a more comprehensive outreach list. And we put out the solicitation specifically looking to get participation from groups that served people with low incomes and low income families, that specifically served and worked with communities of color, and those that worked with tribes. And again, we offered scholarships, which is a key piece to enabling those folks to participate when this work around solar was of interest, but wasn't kind of directly in service of their core missions. So we did another 8 months of work with Group 2.0. We learned even more about their challenges. We helped build their solar knowledge. We really got into the details on the technology, system costs, financing, related issues. And this really, and we heard this, we did lots of qualitative and, semi-quantitative feedback and follow up with all of these groups about their experiences. But developing this expertise was a critical piece of empowering them so they would later be able to initiate projects or engage in things like policymaking. And then lastly, we continue to keep those relationships alive through checking in periodically and inviting them to provide input through different channels and partnership on other opportunities. So around this same time, we started to shift into our experimentation mode. And the way we did this was to offer small innovation grants to help community groups develop their own projects and to flesh out their own ideas for how you could run a solar program. We offered up to about $10,000 per grant. And these really capped off that effort to build capacity and empower community groups to do the work of coming up with, kind of locally tailored solutions that would meet their community's needs. And the result of that is that we got some really exceptional learning that then helped us move forward into our next stage, which was developing new approaches. So adapting our existing solar program at Energy Trust and creating new offers that were going to be more responsive to the needs and the priorities of our communities. So I'm going to take just a couple minutes here as I wrap up my time to highlight 2 new offers that emerged from this work and to give you a teaser for 3 more that are in the works. And as Warren mentioned, these are described in greater detail in our case study. And harkening back to that slide I showed at the very beginning of the design thinking approach that we use, this is really where we got into that rapid, like, build, measure, learn kind of quasi-agile loop. And I wanted to point out for those who work on program design that, typically for us, it can take up to 6 months to design and launch a new program offering, sometimes longer if it's really complex. And traditionally, there hasn't been a lot of chance for meaningful stakeholder input until we're kind of almost too far along to make major changes. It really tends to be more feedback and adjustments. I want to say that both of these new offers that I'm going to talk about, we were able to launch these within 2 months from when we decided, yeah, let's do this, to getting something on the street. And we did that by rapidly prototyping. So staff developed a proposal, got feedback from that working group network that we'd created, which by version 2.0 was quite large, would rework the proposal, repeat that cycle several times until we got to a ready to launch program. And I think that that's really important to be able to move forward more quickly and with more meaningful input from communities. So the first new offer I'm going to talk about is our Community Solar Development Assistance offer. So this was an incentive offering to help support early development activities of small and public or nonprofit-led projects that are participating in Oregon's new community solar program. So broadly, the objective is to increase the feasibility and success of these projects because we know that they face additional barriers, and to give them additional support so that they kind of have an equitable opportunity to participate in our program alongside larger national developers who are building into our community solar program. Community solar is important for a lot of reasons, but critically, it is the most effective way, we believe, to reach renters and provide them with direct financial savings from solar. So some of the features of this offering include timing. So this funding is provided and available to projects during the early stages when they're trying to establish feasibility and navigate other activities that they have to get through before they can even apply to that program. Feasibility, interconnection work, all of that costs real money, and this funding is for that work. Unique is also the focus. We're focusing on small community-led projects because we believe that those projects bring additional values, because they're more likely to be rooted in communities and because they face greater barriers. We also are requiring that the projects that receive this funding have specific stated goals for benefiting or more deeply benefiting underserved customers above and beyond what's required as a minimum criteria for Oregon's community solar program. So specifically, they need to say what amount of capacity or what dollar savings will be going to certain groups of customers. And then I would say another unique aspect of this is who we're paying. Kind of traditionally, when we've offered development funding, we have reimbursed projects for work that was performed by third-party consultants. Like, you hire this technical assistance provider and we'll cover 80% of that cost. We expanded that and under this offering provide incentives directly to cover the cost of a nonprofit's organization's time that they're spending on development work. And our goal is for that, and hope is that 40% of the projects we support with this assistance will go on to get constructed and become operational. I can say as of the end of June, we'd received 10 applications for this funding from a variety of community-led projects, and we're excited about the progress they're making on their work. So the second new offering that we've come out with in the last 8 months here is called Solar Within Reach, which provides increased incentives to income qualified homeowners and is delivered through a special group of highly qualified kind of participating solar trade allies. And our goal here is to make rooftop accessible to homeowners who've traditionally found it just out of reach, so moderate income homeowners. The features of this are higher incentives to offset a greater portion of the upfront cost. It's about 4 times higher than our standard offer, and it has a much higher cap. And again, we have a special pool of trade allies who get additional training and agree to higher customer service standards and consumer protection standards. We are also planning, or had been planning, to do targeted campaigns and collaborations with community organizations to promote the offering, though that's been put on hold as a result of the COVID situation. And I would say our original first-year budget for this offer was about $600,000, but we've more than doubled that to closer to $1.8 million to account for how much demand we've had for this. And we also ended up increasing or expanding eligibility in response to COVID. So, you know, our initial short-term goal was to reach 100 customers by the end of 2020. And I would say we've already got over 85 applications, so we're ahead of schedule for our target on this offering. And then real briefly, in the works, we've got a couple of additional offers that we expect to be on the street in Q3 and Q4 of this year. The first of which is kind of a companion offer to the Solar Within Reach offering that I just described, that's for certain kinds of commercial projects. It's focused on affordable multifamily, service organizations that are serving people with low income and communities of color, tribes, and then businesses owned by women and people of color. Similarly to Solar Within Reach, it'll just have much higher incentive rates to cover more of the upfront costs. We're also looking at rolling out an installation incentive for community solar projects that fit kind of the same criteria as the community solar development assistance offer, and then expanding development assistance funding for rooftop projects that support equity objectives and include resilience as well. So in conclusion, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the lessons we've learned. First, it is just really important to get connected. All those conversations we had, all those meals we ate together, all the hours we spent in the car hitting the road, and literally meeting people where they are, that created opportunities for true learning and listening and getting to know people in communities. And that was the foundation for this work and everything going forward. We've also learned that you have to take intentional, deliberate action to make a process inclusive. It's not enough to issue the invitation. Community groups are really busy. We need to make it worth their time and value their time and their expertise to focus on solar, and it's important to use their time wisely. So that involves a combination of offering funding so that they're able to participate, and also making sure that as we develop the content, think about your agendas, that it's relevant for everyone, and it's using everybody's time well. And it's also about making sure that you're empowering your participants with the knowledge and information that they need to actually actively and successfully participate in decision making. Third, and I can't say this enough, is that you need to listen. And I'll give you an example. At our first meeting with our working group 2.0, we're in our first meeting, we're so excited, we're planning to talk about the state's community solar program, which was like an active development. And we got some feedback from some members of the group who outspokenly and appropriately said, after we described what community solar was, they're like, look, we barely know about solar and you're trying to talk to us about a timeshare, which was their interpretation of what community solar sounded like. So, right there, then and there in that meeting, we pivot, we drop that agenda item, and we switch to a discussion about why people wanted to get involved in solar in general, and realized that we had not appropriately kind of primed the pump or, given them the stepping stones to get to where they needed to be to understand what community solar was all about. And then lastly, we learned that we need to empower others to develop solutions and to innovate. We quickly learned that we don't have all the answers, but that the answers do exist out there if we give people the resources to find them. So, while the story I told here, I used, this journey, this road as an analogy, kind of in conclusion, I would say that this process isn't, and it wasn't a linear one-way trip. It's got loops, it's got backtracks where the learning and discovery kind of triggers more nuanced realizations and more learning. And in the end, our goal has kind of shifted. It's not so much about the end point. It's not about going in a straight line, but it's just to keep moving in the right direction. So with that, thank you so much for your time. and I look forward to taking questions.
Hey, Lizzie, thanks very much. Let me just ask one question now, and then we hope we'll have time for some more later. What was the strategy for selecting locations for the initial community listening sessions, and what strategies did you use to make sure you got 40 people for each meeting?
Yeah, so we picked our locations primarily based on geographic distribution. You know, we had 5 community listening sessions, and it gave us pretty good coverage throughout the state in rural in the city of Portland, but then also in some rural communities, but rural communities that were centered within reasonable access and cities. So that's how we picked them, was just geographic diversity. And then we reached out to local organizations to help kind of craft our invite list. And we did actually consult with another organization that does a lot more community-based outreach to help us create the initial invitation list for that. But really the word just got out. We worked with local partners and encouraged them to spread the word. And again, offering a free meal will help people show up.
Hey, thanks very much. Let's switch now to Michigan, and we'll come back to questions for everyone later. And in terms of our Michigan presentation, we have 2 presenters. Let me introduce them both. First of all, Julie Staveland has a master's in public administration and is a manager at the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. She supervises the energy services, recycling, and sustainable development areas, as well as oversees federal DOE state energy program funding and oversees several community technical assistance grants that encourage and educate key stakeholders and local government leaders on action steps covering a range of topics such as planning and policy needed for change, energy storage, transportation electrification, and a clean energy economy. And Julie's going to be joined by Lisa Thomas, who's an engineer at the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Lisa works to strategize new clean energy opportunities for the state of Michigan. She primarily manages the clean energy and renewable programs for low to moderate income families, particularly the Clean Energy for Low to Moderate Income Community Accelerator in the Cherryland territory. And she does that to increase solar and energy efficiency in Michigan. She's leading a similar community accelerator project in the village of Lance and a clean technology program for Michigan-based small businesses. So let me turn it over to Lisa and Julie.
Thank you, Warren. Hello, everyone. Myself and Julie will be discussing the Michigan Solar Communities Low to Moderate Income Access Program and its extended features. The My Solar Communities Low to Moderate Income Access began as an accelerator with the U.S. Department of Energy. Through Silica, we were provided funds to create a community program that would provide low-income access to renewable energy and potentially address low-income energy challenges by developing locally designed energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. The first few phases were to focus on each of Michigan's electric utility type, meaning an electric cooperative, municipality, and investor-owned utility, which would allow for a beginning step in providing a platform for all communities to start implementing within their communities. In addition to the low-income access program design information, this allows for communities to use the Michigan Renewable Zoning Database to determine areas for developing. Later on, I will let my colleague Julie discuss the database and how it can be utilized. We wanted this program to be a successful program and to find ways to provide access to renewable and also address low-income energy burden and challenges. By providing this opportunity for the subscribers to participate, we wanted to further reduce the household's electric usage and help subscribers on a path towards energy self-sufficiency. In order to achieve this goal and program idea, partnerships were developed. During the initial stage of each phase, there were a lot of stakeholder meetings and conversations between the state government and local energy service providers. EGLE led the discussions between partners and assisted in additional work when necessary and needed. The local CAA and Michigan DHS assisted with identifying eligible households that were eligible to participate. Partnering with DHS and the local CAA allowed for households to retrieve weatherizations. In addition to weatherization, the local electric utility was and is the solar energy program host. They assisted with enrolling the identified households into the solar energy program so that eventually subscribers will receive the solar credits. The U.S. Department of Energy and the Michigan Public Service Commission were a part of the conversation, and they helped bridge and figure out the best way to get the program started. We are thankful for having great partners and being able to create a sustainable, value-added programs and services in Michigan that were utility or energy related. After collaborating and partnering, we were able to create our first phase 1 project in the Cherryland Electric Cooperative territory, phase 2 in the Village of Lawrence territory, and phase 3 in an investor-owned utility, which is currently under development. Now I would like to describe in detail the partnerships, the program designs, and lessons learned for each phase. So phase 1 was in the Cherryland Electric Cooperative territory, which includes 6 of Michigan's counties, which is showcased and displayed in the picture. The partners involved were state departments, the formerly known Michigan Energy Office, which is now housed in EGLE as Energy Services, the Michigan DHS, the local electric utility, and Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency. The subscribers enrolled in the program had to fall 200% and below the federal poverty line and had received weatherization. Each subscriber received 9 panels, which averaged $29 per month and $350 per year in solar credits. The size of the Cherryland Electric Cooperative system is 450 solar panels, and the energy services contribute to 200 panels for the low-income subscribers. There is an income verification check that occurs every 5 years in order to validate subscribers' eligibility in the program. The program was launched in March of 2018. The project was a success. We had partners willing to participate, which allowed for us to reach the project goals. We were able to complete the accelerator and produce a project that not only provided access to renewable energy, but also addressed the low-income energy burden and costs through weatherization. Some of the lessons learned from phase 1 was understanding and making sense of the data. In order to do this, all partners were willing to contribute, providing the energy usage, late payment, energy assistance, and survey. Some of the bumps with the data analysis were partners having to go through old files to find when households were weatherized, extracting the 50 subscribers' information to mail surveys to, and retrieving the best data to understand the impact of weatherization. One of our solutions of understanding our subscribers was conducting a survey. The survey purpose was to understand the impact the program had on the subscribers' participation in the program and being weatherized. There was no preliminary survey conducted before the program to understand our subscribers' feelings and knowledge of the program. However, only a short post-survey was made to grasp an understanding of our customers. There was wording of income verification in our partnership agreements, but we did not know who would conduct this verification annually. Thankfully, though, the Northwest Michigan CAA was willing to verify after year 1 of the program. So now I would like to provide you guys with some of the data results I received from our phase 1 project. And some of the metrics that we were following and tracking were the average electricity cost prior to and after weatherization services, as well as the average electricity usage prior to and after enrollment into the solar program. After analyzing the survey data and the data, there was about a 10% late payment decrease and nearly a 1% energy usage decrease. As is displayed in the pie graph are the variety of survey comments we received, such as subscribers feeling less stressed and having the capability of increasing temperatures for a warmer and healthier home. I would also like to point out the top benefits that subscribers receive were weatherization, access to solar energy, and they also began a step towards energy self-sufficiency. Now I would like to move over to phase 2, which is in the Village of Lawrence territory. The Village of Lawrence is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where we contributed to assisting 25 low-income households. And also the Village of Lawrence is a municipality electric utility. The partners involved were State Department Energy Services and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the local electric utility, and BHK Community Action Agency. Priority was given to the subscribers of the program that fell at or below the 200% federal poverty line and had been weatherized. Each subscriber was enrolled and participated in the on-bill finance program that allowed subscribers to choose to receive up to 10 solar panels, which averaged about $23 per month in solar credits. Energy Services and the subscriber contribute to the panel's on-bill fee of 90 cents per panel per month. There's an income verification check that occurs in order to validate the subscriber's eligibility in the program. The size of the Village of Lawrence system was 200 solar panels and 110 kilowatt system. The program was launched in September 2019. We wanted to build upon from what we learned in our successes from phase 1 and the advantages and success stories that we saw within the Village of Lawrence project was establishing a full extensive subscriber survey of both preliminary and post. And we were able to understand our subscribers through social engineering and created a on-bill financing type of program. Some of the lessons learned from phase 2 was really understanding our partnerships' responsibilities and how much of a load they can handle and contribute. And Energy Services was able to assist with the development of an extensive survey that really provided more information and analysis of our subscribers. But what we were having troubles with figuring out was who could conduct the surveys and how they were going to be conducted. Either was it by phone, mail, or email. And we decided to do it by phone, which led to a high chance of surveys being completed. Lastly, we were in deliberations with the electric utility to make sure customers understood how transferability worked and making sure this allows for subscribers to be able to continue to participate in the program if they move locations. And this also left room for potentially new subscribers to enroll in the program. So with phase 3, or currently we are in phase 3, which is going to be held in the investor-owned utility territory. We are currently in discussion with partners and hopes to launch by fall of 2020. We wanted to build upon from what we learned in our successes from phase 2, and we are currently working with the University of Michigan to create a feasible project design. And Dr. Tony Reams and Carl Hesch are spearheading the design to ensure that energy justice is incorporated for the subscribers within the service territory and improve on data analysis. As phase 1, 2, and 3 are focused on addressing low-income communities' access to renewables, we are continuing to develop, expand, and provide additional resources and guidance through our Michigan zoning database. I will now like to pass it over to Julie to discuss the Michigan zoning database.
Thanks, Lisa. So beyond the 3 phases, we really wanted to make sure that communities all across the state had access to create a community solar program. So in a tangent project, we have a grant with the University of Michigan, and through that grant, they created a zoning database for all of our 1,856 jurisdictions throughout the state. And what this database does is it catalogs each of the jurisdiction's zoning, and whether or not that zoning includes a reference to renewable energy, whether it be solar or wind or residential as well as commercial. And so the thought behind this is having this out there as a free and accessible service to our communities. They can see what their current zoning regulations are easily, and then also compare theirs to other communities throughout the state. Maybe they know of a project that's happening in another community. They can look up to see what those zoning requirements are and how they might implement that within their own community. And so this is available. It's updated regularly as new zoning requirements are implemented or updated. We update that information and it's available on our website.
I would like to thank everyone for your time, and I hope you enjoyed and gained insights of the Michigan Solar Communities Low to Moderate Income Access Program.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you. And let me ask one question of you, and then I have various questions have come in for all 3 states. But the question I want to ask first here is, for your initial 2 pilot programs, what proportion of household energy needs are typically met by the solar installations?
Can you repeat that one more time, Warren?
Yeah, for your initial 2 pilot projects in Cherryland and the Village of Lance, for the participants, how much of their electricity ends up being supported by their community solar subscription?
Right, so how much does the solar credits benefit their electricity usage?
Yeah.
I want to say about 25%. It helps decrease their electricity bill usage.
Okay, great. And one other question for you. Was it hard to find utility partners for the first 2 pilots? How did you go about selecting Cherryland and the Village of Lance?
Right. So once I was the lead manager for these programs, it was under my impression that the electric utility providers were interested in creating a nice, inclusive solar energy program within their territory.
Okay, great. Well, I have some questions for all 3 states, and let me start with one for Kelsey. And this goes back way towards the beginning of your presentation, where you talk about the study that suggested that third-party ownership would be less beneficial to the consumers than a loan product. And we got 2 questions about that. And one was whether that also applies to a third-party community solar option. And then secondly, when you were evaluating the loan option, was that including the fact that somebody who takes out a loan is going to be responsible for operations and maintenance?
Hi, Warren. So let's see. I'll take to the kind of first part first. And then it's been a while since I've read through that study in detail. So I think the kind of short answer to the community solar is that it wasn't part of that study specifically. This was looking at kind of direct owned residential solar, rather than a community solar specifically. I think from a kind of more anecdotal sense, there would probably be a somewhat similar tale in that, anytime you're bringing on a third-party owner, the way they're making that model work is because they're taking some portion of the benefits for themselves, and then being able to, provide a portion to the participants. So it likely has a kind of similar structure. That being said, there are plenty of reasons and cases where third-party ownership might be the right solution, and can, in certain cases, maximize benefits. Cases like nonprofits where they aren't able to take advantage of the federal tax credit, right? Having a partner that can take advantage of that tax credit and split some of those benefits is a way for that nonprofit to access the credit, and so can change what that economics looks like. So I don't have a direct answer from that one on the community solar front, though I think there's probably a lot of parallels there. The other piece I would say from Massachusetts perspective is there's only been a few cases where someone has made a kind of what we would consider a more direct purchase community solar model work out. There have been a couple here in the state, but they've been challenging from a lot of legal and other legwork that has to go into that type of project. And then to the second one, yes, the analysis did kind of consider the fact that maintenance would be an ongoing portion of those costs, and that in the direct ownership case or financed case, the system owner is taking that on. The nice thing about solar PV arrays is they're generally considered to have pretty low O&M costs over the life of these projects, and particularly over time as technologies have changed and things. You're now seeing microinverters are also warranted for 20-25 years, as well as the panels. So even some of the historical costs that you would have expected with a central inverter replacement or something like that, you're starting to see that change a little bit as technologies develop.
Hey, thank you. And here's a question for Lizzie in Oregon, and this also relates to community solar. You mentioned when you were talking about the recent community solar program that the focus is on small projects. What's the definition of small projects? And are there any funding limits for a qualified project?
Great question, yes. So Oregon's community solar program broadly supports projects up into the multi-megawatt size, but the community solar development assistance funding that Energy Trust has offered, when we talk about small projects, there is a kind of a category that is defined within Oregon's community solar program for small projects. I'm using air quotes here, and that is defined as projects that are 360 kW AC and under, and this is derived from some REC reporting requirements. There's nothing magical about 360 kW AC otherwise, and for that reason we just aligned with that definition. But I think more significantly is the requirement that the project have a proponent, that it's really kind of a community-driven, community-led effort.
Thank you. And this is a question for Julie about the zoning study that you talked about. And someone's asking, can you say how it was conducted? For example, did it scan existing database systems, or was the data gathered through a structured survey, or was there something else?
Yeah. So with our grant with the University of Michigan, they had a team of research assistants, student volunteers, and interns that actually went to all of the 1,856 jurisdictions on their websites, calling them, sending emails to see if we could get a copy of it or where it was located on their website. And so they physically went to every single one on the website to find it, reference it, and so on the database you can actually go to the website if it's on there. Some of the smaller jurisdictions, they don't have their zoning up on their website. They're just usually a one-man show. And so there are some holes in it right now, but we're working on gathering that. But it was mostly manpower. We found that there wasn't a one-stop shop to locate all of the zoning documents within the state. And so that was the primary reason behind this effort, was to have that one place where people could go to find that and identify whether or not it referenced renewable energy.
Thank you. And this is a question for everybody about what happened when you were first initiating your program, whether you did this in part in response to public or regulatory pressure, or was there another motivation for getting started in trying to address low and moderate income solar? And maybe we could go around and we'll, start Massachusetts, Oregon, then Michigan.
Sure. So there's a kind of a few pieces. Organizationally for MassCC, targeting these communities was something on our priority list already when we were looking at these types of programs. So there was kind of an organizational directive in that sense, anyways. Assistance to these markets had been part of prior programs we'd had as well. So our rebate program dating back 4 years prior to that had also had a low and moderate income adder. So it's been something that has been in our work for a while. The Mass Solar Loan Program specifically was born out of that study, but there's actually also a little kind of more regulatory piece to it, in that when the state launched its SREC incentive program back then as a production-based incentive program, as part of that process, there was a directive to look at look at a loan program essentially to solve the kind of upfront cost challenge that owning systems would result in, given that the incentive program was not going to be an upfront rebate, but going to be a production incentive over time. And so actually kind of during that regulatory process, there was a little bit of a directive to look at this type of program as well. And then the kind of focus within that on access and reaching low and moderate income came out kind of more through the design and stakeholder work around that program.
From Oregon's perspective, I spoke to this a little bit in terms of our journey and kind of starting with the realization. I would say that realization was the intersection of a lot of different things that were happening. I would say, and this is looking at kind of late 2016, 2017 era. First of all, I think the conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion in the broader kind of solar industry and around programming was really starting to gain momentum as kind of studies were coming out that were showing where the gaps were. So I think that was a conversation that was starting to build a head of steam. Specifically at Energy Trust, in I think December of 2017, our board adopted a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, which led to the adoption of a operations plan that had a lot of very specific goals. And so that as an organization, we were sort of moving in the direction of becoming very focused and intentional around reorienting all of our programs, both efficiency and renewables, around underserved customers. So that was another sort of log on the fire. And then, as I mentioned, there was this funding opportunity that came up through the U.S. Department of Energy that we were fortunate enough to get to take part in, and that I again just kind of helped accelerate and focus our work.
Thanks. Let's move on to Michigan, about the origins and your motivations for getting involved with this sort of initiative.
Yeah, I think we're really similar to Oregon in that respect too. It was a combination of timing and things that we were seeing within the state. We really wanted it to be an equity and accessibility thing for all of our communities and all of our residents to have that opportunity to purchase renewable energy, and have access to it regardless of their income level. And there was the funding opportunity from the Department of Energy that allowed us to participate in that first Celica accelerator. You know, and our goal is, you know, eventually we want to have community solar throughout the state, and regardless of the utility type, whether it's a co-op or a muni or an investor owned, you know, and whether they're renters or owners or, you know, single family home or multifamily home, we want it to be accessible to all of our residents throughout the state.
Thank you. Here's another question for everyone, and Lizzie touched on this in part, but someone asked about whether any of your programs give preference to or incentives for particular types of solar installations, you know, such as installation for, installers who are small, who are local, women-owned, people of color-owned, anything else. Lizzie, you mentioned that in relationship to the community solar program, but is there any other aspects of what you've talked about today that try to give any of those preferences or advantages?
So I can touch on it briefly from a Massachusetts perspective.
Yeah, sure. Right.
We don't have any specific requirements in that regard to our program. We are open to any installer who wants to participate. That being said, again, kind of one of the design features and things considered during the development was that this type of program could be more beneficial for the smaller, more local installers. Bigger installers might have had capability to partner with a financier or offer a financing product on their own, and might have had solutions they could provide customers before that a smaller installer, you know, or little couple man or, you know, one person shops might not have. And so having this type of program that would give them a financing opportunity they could provide to their customers and let them reach a broader range of customers, even for the smaller entities, was certainly a kind of design feature of how we wanted to structure the program. So no specific requirements, but certainly a kind of structured concept that this would help the smaller installers have a new product they could offer.
And Lizzie, anything else you want to say on this topic?
So on the topic of installers, that, you know, I didn't really speak to that at all in my presentation, and I'll keep this brief, but we have a whole kind of different strategy and approach around workforce development and diversifying the individuals and the businesses that Energy Trust is working with, and just frankly that exist in our industries, both on the efficiency and the solar side in Oregon. So that is that work is happening, and there's a lot of if you're interested, I'm happy to kind of share more about how Energy Trust is working to diversify that pipeline and support financially and with other sorts of business development assistance, those kinds of installers. On the actual project side, as I mentioned, we do have a new incentive offering that's kind of oriented around service providers, a commercial type installation incentive that is has, you know, affordable multifamily, nonprofits, organizations that are serving communities of color and low income tribes. And then the fifth category of eligible businesses are businesses that are majority owned by women or people of color. And so, you know, that's a specific category. It's not on the installation side, but to support businesses that are minority owned. And we're kind of continuing to think about this on the residential or the direct customer side as well, of how do we intentionally reach customers in particular groups, and specifically people of color. And that's really looking like specific partnerships with community-based organizations that work with specific communities. And how can we work with those organizations on different delivery models or customized incentive offerings that we offer in partnership with them. So we don't have anything kind of concrete in the works yet, but we're really trying to figure that new delivery approach out.
Great. And anything, Julie or Lisa, you want to say about Massachusetts and trying to provide incentives for certain types of installers?
Yeah, for Michigan, for the installers, as a program manager, we don't work directly with the installers. The electric utility works more so with the installers and installation of the solar panels. And but as far as project wise, I do concur with what Oregon was saying, as far as we are trying to incorporate energy justice with all our phases and provide that access to low income communities.
Well, thanks very much. You know, all of you folks have been engaged with very impressive, very interesting programs. I learned a lot from listening to what you had to say. I hope others on the line have as well. I want to turn this over to Samantha, who's going to tell folks about some upcoming webinars and about the case study report. Samantha.
Hey, thanks, Warren. So first, I just want to tell everyone that you can learn more about all of the award winners at the web address that you see on your screen. That's where more details about the webinar series are posted, and also a link to the report that contains all of the case studies. As Warren said, we do have several webinars coming up, including 2 in August that are part of the State Leadership in Clean Energy webinar series. Those are the webinars listed in red. We hope that you can attend those. And we just want to say thank you all for joining us today. That concludes our webinar. And for more information about CESA and the 2020 State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards, you can visit the links posted on your screen. Thanks, everybody.